Fish and Rice Stories from Japan. I'm Toby.
I'm Andrei.
And today we have a very special guest with us, Klepto. Welcome to the show. And you're here today to talk a little bit about cosplay.
Yes, thank you for having me.
So before we get started a little bit, could you introduce yourself? Maybe tell us how long you've been here in Japan and how you got into the world of cosplay.
All right. Well, yeah, I'm Klepto. I've been in Japan for 9 years now, but I've been cosplaying for 13, I just realized. How I got into the world of cosplay, let's see. I knew about cosplay for a while from reading like Nintendo Power magazine back in the day. I'd seen some cosplayers like Pikmin Link in the featured there, but it was always like Zelda or Mario or things that I knew about but wasn't necessarily into. And then one day I was looking for an image of the world map of Final Fantasy VII, and I went to some really small fan site, and there was a collection of like people's cosplay photos from Final Fantasy VII, and that was a series that I was really into. And I was like, oh my gosh, you can like dress up like these characters too. And that just like opened my whole world, and I researched everything I could about cosplay, and when I had the chance I gave it a try.
So you kind of got into it through video games in a way?
Yes, definitely through video games. I would say the large majority of my cosplay now are also from video games.
And so you, in the cosplay world, you're known as Klepto.
Yes.
Does this name have any specific meaning for you?
It's something that a bunch of people, different people, started calling me in high school because I had a habit of taking things out of trash bins and recycle bins, things that I thought could be reused into art projects or made into cosplay weapons or things. And so they're like, you're always stealing stuff. We're just going to call you Klepto. And so I kind of adopted that as my nickname, and it just has stuck over the years. So.
How is it in the world of cosplay? So just maybe to summarize, cosplay, we can maybe dive into the definition a little bit later, but it's the hobby, we can call it a hobby, I guess, of wearing a dress of a fictional character.
Yes.
It has to be a fictional character, right? Or you would not call cosplaying an actor, or...
I guess you could. I would say that most cosplay is of fictional characters or characters from some sort of media. I mean, people do cosplay characters from live action shows as well. I guess it could be a real person. That's less common, but yeah, dressing up as something that's based on something that already exists. Generally.
Some people dress up as Japanese idols, I hear.
Yeah, I guess that could also be considered cosplay. I would say it's like maybe a sub-genre of cosplay, but yeah, that would also count.
And so you, when you do cosplay, you make your costumes, or perhaps some people buy costumes. We can get into the costume design later, but then you have to choose a name, right? So you have chosen Klepto as a nickname taken from before. Is it a little bit like video games where you just pick a nickname, or does it have to represent something specific? Do you have to take on the name of the character you're cosplaying? How does it work?
It's very flexible. I think it just comes from whatever people have already been using as their name online. I was using Klepto for some, like my nickname in video games, and then started using it for cosplay. But I have friends, especially in Japanese, people will choose whatever they want for their cosplay name. There's a lot of people with food for their name, or sometimes they just combine some kanji that they like. Yeah, I think it's really flexible, whatever you feel comfortable being called. Some people choose their name purely because it's memorable for other people that they meet.
There's just like a nickname or pseudonym like in a video game.
Exactly,
basically.
yeah.
So for someone who is not too familiar with cosplay like me, if I were to look at a cosplay convention or at a cosplayer, people who are watching the video will see you currently wearing one of your outfits. And what are like 2 or 3 things one should pay attention in cosplay? What are like important features that you would say? Important
features of cosplay. I think personally my main one is always to have fun. That's the most important thing. That's the only way you can cosplay wrong is by, being rude to other people or something like that, and not having fun. Like, the whole point is we're all nerds wearing costumes of fictional characters. So you got to have fun with it. Other points to That's a good question.
What about the outfits themselves? Is it
The outfits themselves.
does it have to be 100% accurate reproduction of the original thing, or is there some freedom to be? I'm doing my own interpretation of this character, for example.
Yeah, there's definitely that freedom as well. I think it all depends on your particular style of cosplay. Some people prefer to try to be as accurate as possible. Personally, I like that challenge, so I try to get a lot of details very accurate to how they appear in the game. But some people like to, for example, gender bend their character to a different gender and say maybe they'd wear this, or if they were in this alternate universe, they might wear that. And then some people just want to wear the outfit and not the wig. And for me personally, I think that's great. Yeah, whatever you want to, however you want to interpret it, as long as you're having fun, that's the main thing. However, in Japan, some things like that where they change the outfit fall under this category that's called netsuzo, or like a fabrication.
Okay.
And sometimes that's actually not allowed at cosplay events here, whether that's not allowed in the rules or you'll just kind of be shunned by the community. That's actually
very strict, right?
A rather strict part of cosplay in Japan specifically. I would say overseas it's not like that.
You just brought up a very interesting point about differences between Japan and the Japanese cosplay scene and overseas. So you're from the United States.
Yes.
How different are they? What was maybe something that you really noticed when you first came here and you joined your first cosplay event? You were like, wow, this is so different from what I'm used to.
The biggest difference by far is the changing rooms. So when you go to an event in America or most other countries, you like change at the hotel and then walk to the event center. Here you have to change at the event. You're not allowed to come to the event wearing cosplay. You're not allowed to wear cosplay on the train.
What's the reason for that?
The reason was to like not cause a stir in public. I think the other reason is like some people have large armor or weapons or things that would be a hassle on the train. But yeah, that's the official reason, is to kind of not cause trouble in public.
The first thing that comes to mind though now is that Halloween is really big in Japan, right? And
Yeah.
then on Halloween you see people walking on the street with all kinds of
Definitely.
costumes, and some of them are very advanced with weapons.
Yeah, Halloween has only really gained popularity here in Japan within like the last 5 or so years. And I think that's an interesting thing because it's kind of bringing costumes, not always cosplay, but costumes in general, more to a larger audience. And yeah, it's in a space where it's okay on that day for people to wear it on the train and things. So yeah, that's kind of an interesting recent development.
Is
I would
Halloween
say.
big among cosplayers? Or is it a big event, or are people excited about it?
I would say most people who like dressing up like any occasion to dress up. For me, Halloween's my favorite holiday because you get to wear a costume and people give you candy. Like, what could be better?
Perfect combination. Huh?
But yeah, I would say like most cosplayers probably like Halloween, and there are sometimes like Halloween special cosplay events and things as well.
So to get back a little bit on the differences between overseas and now, you said the biggest difference by far was a changing room.
Yes.
Is there anything else in terms of maybe how people interact with each other, what people pay attention to in a cosplay, or how the community is?
Definitely. First of all, just going back to the changing room thing for a second, what that means is I was originally picturing like a room with sinks and mirrors that people can change in. It's usually just a room, just a normal room, and everyone has like just the amount of space to sit down and put your suitcase in front of you. And you have to change there with no, you're only your own little folding mirror, no sink or anything, and put on your whole costume. And meanwhile, they're always telling you, make more space for more people to enter the room, especially at large
Doesn't seem
conventions.
very convenient.
It's crazy. So I think that's something really different. You have to prepare not only to be able to wear your costume, but to plan to be able to put on your costume in a very small, confined space. And that's a skill set that I think is necessary for cosplay in Japan.
That reminds me, a couple of weeks ago I went for a race, just like running, and it was the same. The changing room was basically just a random room they picked, and all the runners had to change their, of course, changing into running clothes is much easier than putting on a cosplay costume, but I thought it was also kind of interesting that, they put some plastic sheets on the floor so you can take off your shoes and not like dirty your socks, but that was about it.
Yeah, that's the situation in the cosplay changing rooms as well, it sounds like. So.
And once you're in the convention hall, how does it work then? Is it similar, or are people like interacting differently than overseas?
Yeah, usually there's certain zones where you're allowed to take pictures and areas where you're not allowed to take pictures. So it depends if like it's an event that's also selling comics, for example. There'll be special cosplay zones where you can stand. Sometimes the zones are also separated based on if you have like a weapon over 2 meters long, you have to be in a certain area. Otherwise you have to collapse it for moving in between areas. One thing that's really fun about cosplay in Japan is that everyone makes cosplay like business cards essentially with your cosplay name, where you can find you online and
like social media.
Yeah, and usually some picture of your cosplay. And often you'll have a card for each cosplay that you've made. And when you meet someone new, you'll open your little folder and go, which one would you like? And they can pick, or you can give out, the one for that character that you are that day.
Do you have those?
Yes, I do. I have so many for different characters, and every time I make a new costume, I'm like, oh, I need to make a new cosplay Meishi card.
How many do you print?
A lot. It depends on how big of an event I'm going to, but yeah, sometimes I'll print like 50 or
50.
Yeah,
wow.
It depends
That's
how many people I think I'm gonna meet.
13 years of cosplay will bring you there, I guess.
Yeah.
Do you feel like recently now being in the cosplay scene in Japan more than in the United States has influenced how you cosplay, the types of characters you choose to get into, and maybe how you interact with the community?
Yes, I would say that now I've cosplayed for many more years here in Japan than I ever did in America, but I think American conventions are usually 3 days long and it's like the full time. Here there's a lot of smaller events just for the day, often like between 10 and 4 p.m. So they're quite a short event. You go and take all your stuff, change, take some pictures, meet friends, exchange your cosplay cards, get selfies together, and then go home. And after you go home, you send very formal, the highest level of formality of Japanese messages to everyone on Twitter to be like, oh, it was so nice to meet you today. I hope I see you again. But yeah.
So no casual, suddenly we're friends and we are in the same community and we bonded over kind of maybe cosplaying character from the same game. No, it's like keep your distance and just you are this cosplayer, I'm this cosplayer. We meet at conventions. And
it's interesting because there is a level of closeness because you're we both like this thing and we can both bond over this thing. But there's also within the Japanese otaku community, people are so polite. I think as you get to know people better, sometimes they'll be no, it's okay to speak in standard Japanese. But for those first greeting messages, they're written in a very stiff, formal way. And that was an interesting thing getting started in the cosplay community here, was learning how to speak in that way.
Has it happened, or do you know people to whom it may have happened that you meet someone at a cosplay convention here in Japan particularly, and then you become friends to the point that you meet outside of or do people like to keep their cosplay lives and their non-cosplay lives kind of separate?
I would say that people keep their cosplay lives and work lives really separate a lot of the times, or maybe they'll only tell close friends that they are cosplayers. But it's not uncommon for people to become friends through cosplay and have that expand to other areas of their life and hang out outside of cosplay. They actually have a word for that in Japanese called off-kai.
Off-kai.
So it's
outside the convention.
Yeah, out of cosplay, you're getting together, and that's kind of an interesting thing, but I think it often develops into a much larger friendship.
What is the main reason to keep those two separate?
I think there's still a lot of stigma around cosplay, actually, which is also maybe why you're not allowed to wear it on the trains and things. I think there's such a need to divide your personal life from your work life, and people worrying about how those might interact or how people might judge them if they knew that they were also a cosplayer. So in the past, that's been a big thing. I think that's also the reason so many people use a pseudonym, and I don't know half of my friends' real names, But yeah, there's such a need here to keep private and working lives separate.
So from all the conventions you've attended here now so far, what would be the most memorable experience, or whether it's with meeting maybe a fan or meeting a community? Has there anything that you this was the best moment I've had in my cosplay experience?
It's so difficult because I actually have a lot of those moments.
Well, that's good to hear, right?
Yeah,
That's
I've been able to do some really fun things. One thing that comes to mind is there's a small castle that I was able to do a photo shoot at. They open it up, or you can reserve it for photos sometimes, and that was just like
that's
really
cool.
amazing.
You get even more into context, right?
Yeah, being able to be in that location. And I actually lived in a town that there's an anime that's based on that city. So while I was watching the anime, I was like, oh, these are the same streets I walk down every day to get to work and things. Very small town out in rural Shikoku, but I was able to get permission to cosplay in the like locations that appear in the anime. So that was really fun. Like, that's a unique thing that you can only do in Japan.
Yeah, I guess that I remember a while back I went to travel to Hakone, and I think Hakone is where they did. I don't want to say anything, but one very famous anime is partly based on something around Hakone, and, at least the main street. And you see people often posting photos on that spot where this was inspired from. But yeah, I guess especially Japan is kind of maybe or has the image of being cosplay paradise. Is it?
I think
so?
It is. Not only is it very easy to get supplies here, or I mean, it's easy to order full costumes, but also, you know, the wigs, all the parts that you need. There's so many places where you can buy that very easily. And then there's events, even in rural areas, like almost every weekend, small events. And then we also have cosplay studios here. There's a really good one here in Osaka, actually, that has floors and floors of different photo booths set up for all different kinds of locations. So within one day, you could shoot a very wide variety of photos. And it's only for cosplayers to go to. It's pretty amazing.
And how do you decide who to cosplay then, right? You mentioned earlier you have about more than 50 cards with each of your designs. One thing that comes to mind is they will take a lot of space, right? If you were to keep them, you need a special cosplay closet, but also you might feel differently. But how do you decide, oh, next I want to make this costume? Because it's not done overnight, right? Especially if you do them yourself.
It takes me usually a couple months to make a new cosplay. I'd say I'm on the pretty slow side because I really like to spend time on all the details. But I make my cosplays mostly based on just what characters I like, whether it's a character I connect with or I really like their outfit, or sometimes if it's something new that I want to try to challenge, like I want to try making this armor and see if I can do it, or I want to try making something that incorporates lights, or like, you know, can I do this? So for me, it's that constant challenge of I like the character, and then also, what can I do to try to push my own skills to the next level?
So who are you cosplayed at today?
So today I am Yuna from Final Fantasy X. I actually made this cosplay like, now that I think about it, I think it's been almost 10 years.
Wow.
It's been
still looking like brand new.
Yeah. So I spent a lot of time painting all the details on this cosplay and had a lot of fun with it. I think even though I made it so long ago, it's one that's really special to me.
Is it common to then redress as older costume, or do you always move forward to new things? And
it depends. I would say a lot of people like to just go on to whatever the next new thing that they're excited about is. And that's totally cool too. For me, I really pick characters that I love because I put so much time and effort into making them, that I generally rewear mine over and over again, to the point that I often have to repair them or remake certain parts of them. But yeah, I would say I don't think I've ever thrown away a cosplay. I have all of them, and it's taking up a lot of space in my closet.
And you've brought a few pieces for us today, right? So for our listeners who are not watching the video, we have some very beautiful handmade armor pieces here. And so Klepto, could you tell us a little bit what you have here and how it was made? And
yes. So one of my favorite things to do when making cosplay, actually more than sewing, is making armor. So I wanted to bring some armor to show today because this particular one that I'm wearing actually doesn't have any armor. So let's see. First of all, this is the arm armor from my Tifa cosplay from Final Fantasy VII.
So Final Fantasy, we see that your initial inspiration into cosplay is still strong today.
Very much so. There's still many cosplays from the Final Fantasy series that I want to make. I think those your favorites always stick with you. But yeah, this one, I spent a lot of time trying to cut out all of these runes to be exactly accurate to the same pattern that they are in the game. I tried to zoom in on a lot of screenshots and figure out what exactly they were supposed to look like.
So the angle and everything is as accurate as possible.
Yes. Took me a couple hours, but
are there any rules in terms of the materials you're allowed to use for cosplay?
No, literally anything is okay. So a lot of my armor and cosplay in general is made from things from the 100 yen shop, so like a dollar store.
Being creative, just what's at your disposal to make. You wouldn't never guess that this is kind of made from items. It looks very neatly finished, and it looks like there's leather on top with some. How do you call bolts? Kind of holding it all together. Looks very realistic.
So this is made out of Eva board, which is like a thin craft foam. And then if you can heat it up and shape it. So I just heat it over my stove, shape it into the shapes that I need, and then cover it in layers of white glue and then acrylic paint. And it turns into this very hard armor that works really great. It's light. It's a little bit flexible when it's warm, and it's so versatile for being such cheap materials. So yeah, this also is my
looks like
armor.
a shoulder blade.
Yeah, shoulder armor with some spikes and everything, and the accompanying gauntlet from Okurikara from Token Nambu, which is another game.
Looks solid too.
Yeah, it's quite durable.
A lot of nice straps that hold it together so it doesn't fall off during the convention.
Yes. So, yeah, I try to do interesting things with cheap materials, and I enjoy that challenge too.
So this armor, for example, how long would you say it took you to make?
Oh, this one, I guess if I was spending all my time on it, a couple weeks, maybe a week. Yeah, altogether, this particular costume of Okurikara, I think I spent a couple months on, like mostly working on that because I was actually in between jobs at the time. But I spent a lot of time trying to get the shapes of everything right.
It must be quite the feeling after so many months of stitching, of gluing, of painting, when you finally put the last little piece on it and you're like, the costume is finished, now I can wear it.
It's the best feeling when you put it on for the first time and, you do your makeup and have the wig all styled and you get to take that first, selfie or see yourself in the mirror and you're like, wow, I did it. It all came together.
So this is in a way also one of the big goals from cosplay, I believe, that you get into the role. Of course, you meet other people, but you also want to take a lot of photos as a memory, or in situations you mentioned one of your best memories was to be able to cosplay a character in the original location or to go to the castle. Could you tell us a little bit about the role of maybe photography and social media, more generally speaking, in the cosplay, especially in Japan, if you...
Yes, I would say that cosplayers and photographers here have kind of this symbiotic relationship where, photographers need a subject to take photos of, and cosplayers want someone to take photos of them. I think often at conventions and things in other countries, there's kind of this need to, photographers, you can pay them to take your photo. But here in Japan, it's more of a, we're making a trade. I'm having something to take a photo of, and you're getting your pictures. So photographers will also make little business cards to hand out, and someone will take photos for you. You'll give them your business card. They'll give you their business card, and then afterwards you find each other on usually Twitter and exchange the photos. And thank you for taking photos for me today. Let's meet again at another event.
In this kind of situation, just from a legal perspective, does a photographer usually get the rights to reuse the images for his portfolio or for maybe, I don't know, I imagine there may be cosplay magazines or YouTube channels talking about cosplay, or do you keep the rights to yourself for those photos? Usually
for using it anywhere or even for posting it online, there's this kind of understood agreement that both parties need to have consented to having those posted. So photographers, do not post photos without the cosplayers saying it's okay. I think part of that might also be that many cosplayers edit their photos quite heavily. So they need to edit it in a way that they're comfortable with before posting it. But of course, you have some people who are like, feel free to use it however you want. So I think, it's usually discussed, but until both people say it's okay, people generally avoid posting it anywhere.
I've never really attended a cosplay convention myself, but I've seen some online looking at some forums or some big conventions make the headlines regularly. I can imagine with all this photography and cosplay, there may be quite a lot of abuse also going on, right? How is this being dealt with in terms of protecting the privacy of the cosplayers, protecting their image, and also, although some people might be happy to be taking photos by anyone in any situations, others might prefer to only be taking a photo of when they're at, I don't know, the photo zone or in a pose, but others might not respect this all the time. Is there kind of anything done about this?
Generally, that is part of the rules for participating in an event, that like you're only supposed to take photos in those areas. And of course, it's best to ask first. If somebody's busy or eating, they probably don't want you to take a photo of them. So usually, a photographer will ask, is it okay if I take your photo? And it's totally okay for the cosplayer to say, sorry, not right now. Of course, there are people who will try to break those rules, but in general, I would say people are pretty respectful, and that's kind of the general rules for taking photos.
What are some other challenges that you face as a cosplayer? I can imagine one of the big one is making the costumes, kind of being innovative with what materials to use, how to put it together. What else do you think is like, this is really one of the things to...
One of the biggest challenges, and one thing that's specifically a challenge here, is how to transport your stuff to the event. How can you make it fit in your little rolling suitcase to take on the train?
Especially if you have a 2 meter long big sword
exactly.
or other weapon.
Sometimes there's rules about even the longest pieces of your cosplay cannot be more than 1 meter. So you need to figure out, how can I make it so I can take it apart and make it fit in my suitcase and everything. So I think that's kind of sometimes it's a really fun challenge to figure out, how can I make this so that
and this is something cosplayers talk about too, like, how did you get this word here, and how did you do it, and like, wow, maybe they may be more amazed about your logistical skills than the actual costume.
Definitely. Whenever I see someone with like a huge suit of armor, first thing I wonder is, other than wow, they look amazing, is how did they get that here?
They probably drove a truck to the convention.
It's always really impressive, but I'd say that's kind of an interesting, fun challenge, and also one of the biggest challenges of cosplaying in Japan specifically.
And the scene is always changing, right? Would you say that the history of cosplay started in Japan? Did it? Or at least
I'm a
lot of inspiration from Japanese characters, I guess. How would you say the history maybe has influenced a little bit the current state of the cosplay scene? Domestically here in Japan, but also perhaps overseas. Is there? Do you notice if you are in the United States that maybe people want to copy something being done in Japan, or how is the impact?
In terms of the overall history, I'm a little bit fuzzy on the details at the moment. I feel like I used to know, but I believe cosplay mainly gained popularity from like Star Trek conventions things actually overseas, and then was like imported back to Japan, where it took off in the like anime communities. So it's not necessarily like, it was kind of, it may have started in Japan and then went overseas and then got reverse imported, is I believe the story that I've heard. But in terms of the techniques and things, I see recently the like Western cosplay world borrowing more and more techniques from cosplay here in Japan.
Interesting.
For example, like a few years ago when I was, I guess 10 years ago or so, when I was cosplaying in America, when people would cosplay a male character, for example, they wouldn't wear any makeup because they'd be like, overall, not as many men wear makeup, so this character wouldn't wear makeup. Where in Japan, it was always about looking like the character, looking like the animated, the illustration, not like a real person. So cosplayers tended to do quite heavy makeup even for male characters. And now I see that trend kind of becoming more popular overseas as well. So I think a lot of the techniques that start here in Japan end up taking off in other countries as well.
So is Japan the biggest country for cosplayers, or the most population, so to say, of cosplayers?
I would say so, but I mean, of course, there's so many cosplayers worldwide now, but I do think that Japan, with its cosplay community and the way that it's always evolving and changing and has so many resources for cosplayers, it's often the place where some of these trends start.
Would you say that COVID has impacted the cosplay scene here in Japan?
Definitely. There was a period of time, especially because there's those very crowded changing rooms, that they just stopped doing cosplay events because they couldn't figure out another way to do them safely. Having everyone change squished next to each other, doing makeup next to each other was just not a safe situation for COVID. So for quite a while, things were on pause. And during that time, cosplaying at home really saw an explosion in popularity.
And just posting on social media.
Yeah. Here in Japan, we call it taku kos, which is like, taku is the kanji for like your own home. So cosplaying at home. And I saw a lot of like stores that sell cosplay goods starting to sell a backdrop that you could hang up, on your wall and make it look like you were in different locations. So you could take advantage of cosplaying at home. There were a lot of like articles and tips for cosplaying in your own house.
Do you do it on Zoom, or do you take photos and then just post on social media? What do you do cosplaying at home?
Yeah, just taking lots and lots of selfies or putting your camera on a timer and having things set up and just posting on social media like that.
What are some of the most innovative techniques that you've seen to kind of make a costume and stand out, that you notice this and you're like, wow, this person knows how to do something like different than what I've seen before?
Personally, I'm always really interested to see how people make armor. I borrowed this technique that I use from learning how some other people have done it. So I think things like that. Double-sided interfacing to combine different types of fabric and like put designs onto fabric is one that I've seen a lot lately that looks really nice.
So there are YouTube channels or other platforms where people share these techniques, or are people quite private sometimes about how they made something because they don't want to tell others about?
I would say that overall the community is really open to sharing. If you ask somebody how they made something, they'll generally tell you, and a lot of people will share tutorials or like, this is my process on social media, on YouTube. There's also a cosplay magazine here in Japan called Cosmode that has lots of tutorials for how to make things. And I think that's one of my favorite parts about this community is I like making things and I like learning how to do new things. And it's such a community where people are willing to share that information and try to collaborate and find new ways of doing things. And that's really fun for me.
Do people then also compete sometimes to who has the best cosplay at a convention?
I would say that cosplay contests are more popular at like conventions overseas, not so much here in Japan. Now that I think about it, I can't really think of any events that I've been to here in Japan that have a cosplay contest.
So have you personally joined a contest before, or are you more in for just the making and meeting the people? Yeah,
I'm here for the community. I think I'm not as interested in competing because I think we all bring different aspects even if we're cosplaying the same character. So for me, it's more about connecting to people, meeting people, and taking lots of photos. Plus, I know it takes a lot of time to enter the contest and stand around waiting for the judges and things. So I think I'd rather just be running around making friends. But of course, some people make some really amazing costumes that they enter into contests. And that's totally a fun way to enjoy it too, if that's your thing.
For you, you mentioned earlier that you like to make everything yourself. And I hinted to the possibility that some people may buy a ready-made costume, right? So what is the importance of like first accuracy and authenticity in the cosplay itself? And do people not discriminate perhaps, but not take into consideration if it's just a bought costume from... Is there a difference between costume and cosplay, or? Well,
the difference between costume and cosplay is just like whether it's based on a work that already exists versus like when I hear costume, I think of like being a ghost for Halloween or something. That's the difference there for me. But in terms of bought cosplay versus made cosplay, actually in Japan, the large majority of people buy their cosplay.
Oh, really?
It's so readily available. There are so many stores that you can buy cosplay from, and you can also order things to be custom made. So even like among my cosplay friends here in Japan, a lot of them just buy their cosplay, and they spend all the time on styling their wig, on perfecting their makeup. So like maybe their skills don't lie in, sewing or something, but they can still really enjoy cosplay by putting their energy into the areas that they like. So I think that's totally a cool way to enjoy it too.
So
Sorry. How much would cost a good cosplay in a Japanese store?
It depends on how
quality.
complex it is, but like trying trying to convert numbers in my head, like ichiman gosen, and so
$130.
Yeah, $130 ish, or $150 probably. Depends on how complex it is, but definitely over $100.
So for people who buy the costume, then the most important part will be just getting into the character, right? So they will maybe pretend to, or move or talk like the character that they're cosplaying, and that's what's important for them, as opposed to for you who mentioned that you like to make the costumes, you like to pay attention to the details, which are important to you.
Yeah, I think in the end, the way that once we're wearing it, we have a similar way of enjoying it. For them, yeah, maybe it's more just about like once you get dressed up. I would say overall people don't generally like act like the character. They might, try to mimic some poses and things for photos, but overall you don't see people like pretending that they're the character so much. It's that I'd say that's kind of the divide between cosplay and acting. It's more like modeling than acting, really.
Interesting.
But yeah.
And so when you meet people at conventions, will they notice that you, for example, made it yourself, or that you've like paid attention to details? Is it something that is discussed a lot?
Some people notice and some people don't. I think because I make cosplay, I can generally point out like whether something is made or not. You can kind of tell by the materials. A lot of bot cosplay uses some of the same types of fabrics, and I think that's one thing that's fun with making your own cosplay, is being able to branch out and use a little bit fancier or more unusual types of fabric. But I don't think anyone else is treated any differently, and yeah, the majority of people just buy their cosplay, so I think that's no one is looked down upon for doing that. The only things that you would be looked down upon for here in Japan are like if you're not wearing a wig, if you don't have contacts, sometimes people will not be as friendly to you. So you're not
fully finishing the cosplay, and therefore you kind of like,
So in terms of the way that the Japanese cosplay community can be a little bit strict, they also have this thing called kyara kuzure, which is like being out of character. So if you are breaking the character's image and not portraying them to the best of your abilities, or if you're, for example, a character that's a high school student, but in real life you're an adult who smokes cigarettes, you're not allowed to smoke at the event because that's breaking the character's image. They're a high school student. So I think that's one way in which the Japanese cosplay community can be a bit more strict than cosplay communities overseas.
Do people also collaborate on a cosplay? Maybe some characters are, I don't know, twins, or they are supposed to be a pair in the game, and people kind of work together. Oh, let's cosplay these two together at the convention.
Definitely, yeah. I'd say that's another fun memory from a cosplay event that I went to, was gathering a group of friends who all like the same game, and everyone chooses a character to be, and putting together a group like that and taking photos together. It's really great when you can assemble the whole cast of your favorite game.
Does it affect a little bit also your personal life sometimes to differentiate? Like now I'm doing cosplay, I'm focused on cosplaying, and now I'm not in my cosplay, and to kind of keep it separate sometimes.
I think sometimes it's in terms of like the divide between work and personal life. Sometimes I'm like, how much should I share in things like that? But as I said before, because it's like not really like acting, it's more like modeling, I don't really feel a divide like that. It's mostly just about how can I balance my time to do everything that I want to do.
I guess the time to make all the costumes, and to attend conventions, and maybe to kind of work on the image as well, work on the relationships, is something that takes a lot of work. And would that be one of the things, if someone would want to get into the cosplay scenes here in Japan, what kind of advice would you like to give to them? Is this one of the key points to pay attention to, like managing your time and your separation between work and cosplay?
I think if someone was just getting started, my advice to them would be to make those cosplay business cards and get a big bag of candy. And whenever you meet somebody, give them a card and some candy, and you'll make a lot of friends really fast.
Sounds like Halloween every day.
Yeah, actually a lot of cosplayers exchange some kind of candy. I always buy a couple bags of candy before I go to an event, but it's a sure way to make friends right away, and you'll have a lot of fun.
Is it a tradition, or
not necessarily a tradition, but just fun.
Okay, candy.
Yeah. some kind of candy or cookies, or some people even put together a little like gift bag of items.
So the most important for someone trying to establish themselves here in the cosplay scene in Japan is prepare those cards.
Yeah.
Look it up online how to do them and prepare as many as you can for your previous cosplays and share them with everyone at the convention.
That I would say that's the fastest way to establish yourself within the cosplay community here would be hand out your cosplay cards, and then you'll see those same people at an event in the future. Follow everybody on social media and stay in touch and
prepare for the changing rooms.
Yes, yeah, definitely be ready for the changing rooms. Don't forget your little folding mirror and everything that you need to get ready.
Anything that people should never do at a convention here in Japan?
Never do at a convention in Japan. Trying to be mindful of those rules and also realize that there are some like unspoken rules about the fabricated cosplay, things that don't follow the canon of the game or anime. Just being aware that that's something that, depending on the event, people may or may not be okay with. And not, other than that, I think as long as you're minding your manners, you'll be fine.
What do you think will be now in the next few months, years, the evolution of the cosplay scene here in Japan? Do you notice any trends, or is there anything that you'd like to see in a community here?
One thing that I'm seeing as a current trend that is also something that I'd be really excited about, and also something that was influenced by COVID, is that the changing room situation is starting to disappear.
Okay.
Because of COVID, they're starting to say, if you're staying nearby, you could just change and then come to the event. Or if you're driving a car, you can just drive to the event wearing your cosplay. That used to not be okay. But recently I'm seeing more and more of that, which it would be great if we could get rid of those changing rooms. So I think that's a change that we may be seeing in the next few years, is that the changing room situation goes away entirely, and it's more of more similar to how Western conventions are, where you change nearby and then go to the event, which I think would make like checking in and getting to the event go much more smoothly for the people organizing as well. So,
is there any upcoming event in Japan that you're excited for, that you want to attend?
Yes, actually next month is Machi Asobi in Tokushima, which is one of the largest cosplay events probably in Western Japan, but especially in Shikoku, where I lived for many years and where many of my cosplay friends are. So a lot of people from the surrounding area, including like here in Osaka, will go to that.
Not too far, right? It's an hour and a half, 2 hour drive to Tokushima from Osaka.
It's not too far, and it's a really big event. It happens for 2 or 3 days in a row, and it's along a river. So just that whole like area next to the river, the park opens up for cosplayers, and it's a really fun time.
Where the castle is?
That one, no, not really near the castle, but along the riverside.
Who are you cosplaying?
This time, I'm still trying to decide who I'm going to take, but I think I'm going to take Rindo from Neo: The World Ends With You, which is a game that I really like. I just finished that cosplay earlier this year. And then if I can get it done on time, one of my next cosplays is Kaine from Nier Replicant, and that one is going to be a challenge, but if I can get her finished in time, maybe I'll take her.
Do you have any specific cosplayers that you look up to, that you're like, oh, they are really, really good, and you admire their work and their dedication to?
So many. There's so many good cosplayers on social media that I follow that I'm just blown away by the quality of their work and how they make things, everything from how they make things to how they Photoshop their photos in like the final process. But also just my friends, because I've learned so much from them all the time, and it's so fun to share information. If I start naming names, we'll be here all day, but I can give you a list, or check out the things that I retweet, and there's so many amazingly talented people, and it's really fun to learn those techniques from each other. I love that part of the community.
So for you, the next big step would be to finish this latest cosplay you're working on. How close are you to finishing it?
So far, I've only bought the contacts and wig, so I have not even started. I'm still very much in the planning phase, which involves gathering lots of screenshots from the game, making a list of everything I need, and probably spending a whole afternoon at the fabric store.
And after that, do you already have further plans?
Not so concrete, but
Final Fantasy?
Yes, I'd like to cosplay like all of the female characters plus Tidus from Final Fantasy X. Many other characters that I like from the Final Fantasy series. Yeah, there's so many. Every time I watch something new or play a new game, I'm adding things to my list. Also want to do a lot of things from Nier Replicant and Nier Automata because I've fallen in love with that series recently. One of the characters is like this skeleton thing, and I'm so curious, like, how could I make that? Could I wear like a green screen suit underneath it and film myself in front of a green screen? Like, I have so many ideas. He also appears as a car one time, and like, can I just make the whole car out of cardboard?
Okay.
I have a lot of dreams.
A lot of plans and a lot of exciting projects to come.
Yeah.
So if people cannot see you at Machiatsubi, is that in Tokushima next month, where can they maybe find you online and see all your creations and upcoming cosplays and the previous ones as well?
Yeah, you can find me online on Twitter at kleptoyade or on Tumblr at kleptocos or on Instagram, which I don't use very often, but I might from now on, at kleptodio. So they're all different, but yeah, I'm sure you'll put them on the screen or something.
We'll add them all in the descriptions for all the listeners who'd like to kind of see more of your cosplay. Thank you, Klepto, for your time today and answering all the questions.
Thank you so much for having me on Fish and Rice, and this was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and we're not completely done yet. Andrew prepared a little trivia for you.
Oh.
And for me too, but I'm going to be the eternal loser on this trivias here. So, Andrew, tell us.
Okay, so there will be 3 questions, and all of them, the answer to all of them is a number.
Okay.
So would it be a year or amount of money? And the closer you get, the better. Okay, the first question. The first cosplay cafe in Japan was opened in year.
First cosplay cafe in Japan.
Okay, I've got it.
Okay, so the expert goes first.
1997?
Okay.
Wow, I wrote 1953.
Oh.
1953 is a little bit... Yeah.
A little bit, I'm too avant-gardist.
Yes, it's 1999.
Wow,
99,
very
okay.
close.
Some information gives 1998, but there were debate, and the safest date is 1999 that I found. Okay, you said that many people buy cosplay costumes or cosplay, and there are manufacturers that make those cosplay. And what is the reported revenue of all cosplay costume producers or makers over in Japan per year? Estimated in
if
yen.
I have to do some math, you said about 15,000 yen per cosplay. How many are sold?
That's just for the outfit, not including wig and contacts. So.
Oh my god. So
your best. Okay, I will give you a hint. It's in billions.
Billions, yeah. Oh my
I
gosh,
have
trying
no
to
idea.
convert between English and Japanese
I'll
numbers.
just write this number here. It sounds about wrong, but it has a lot of zeros, so might be.
Okay, how about 850 billion? Wait, 85 billion. Sorry.
85 billion.
Okay, good.
Wow.
Toby?
I don't want to say my number now. I have 7 billion.
7 billion. Okay, it's somewhere in the middle.
In the middle.
It's 35 billion.
35 billion, okay.
Oh, does it make me closer?
That makes you closer. I think you got a point.
Yes. Yes, very good. Okay, last one.
Tiebreaker.
Still 28 million off, but just a number.
Okay, word cosplay or cosplay is Japanese origin, is 2 words from English, costume play. When was the first time this Japanese word appeared in print?
Oh, I feel like I've heard this in the past.
Give me a year. What is the
So in
first
53 there was no cosplay cafe yet. In 97 99 there was a first cafe. So somewhere in between.
time? Good guess.
Yeah, that's a very good guess.
Yeah.
So I will say, because in Japan things move slow, they probably talked about it quite a while earlier. So I would say like 19... You go first.
Okay, I was going to say 1995.
And I'm going to say 1987.
You were closer, 1984.
84,
Wow.
oh,
Nearly
wow.
10 years before the first cosplay cafe.
Yeah,
Yeah, that took a long time to develop. But
that is a while. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank
all
you.
for me.
Yes, thank you, Klepto, for
Thank
your
you.
time. This was very interesting. I certainly learned a lot about cosplay. If you've listened to today's episode, you can find Klepto on her social media channels, which will be linked below. This was Fish and Rice, Stories from Japan. Thank you for listening to another of our episodes, and we'll be back next week.
Thank you so much. This was a great time.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.